Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Bad Brad once again. Now, again, to the guy that says I'm wasting my time, family's still sleeping, and I'm going for video number 2 that I'm shooting this morning. I don't even have a topic in hand, but, I thought about it, So you want to be a rock and roll star? There used to be a song in the 60s. So you want to be a rock and roll star? It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Now, I'm not even sure there's any real rock and roll bands anymore. I don't count Imagine Dragons as a rock and roll band. And what do I mean by rock and roll? There are rock bands now. There are, there's hard rock, there's metal, there's over-the-top metal. I mean, if you can believe it, Van Halen used to be, kind of considered a metal band back in the day when they first came out. And they had, they had a few tracks that, you could say were metal. But, the very definition of metal has greatly changed, man. It is a brutal genre now, no mercy for anyone. But when I say there really aren't any more rock and roll bands, what do I mean by that? Now, Keith Richards had said previously that, bands know how to rock now, but they forget the roll. And, hearing that, I would say that Van Halen was a rock and roll band. Why? What is the roll? Well, I believe the roll is the swing. And Van Halen had grown up, direct lineage from a swing musician. Their father was a clarinetist that played, in Europe and, was a professional musician and had played swing. That is the music. And that is the music that Alex had played with his father. And I'm sure Eddie had played with his father. And those guys could definitely swing. So while Keith Richards probably wouldn't necessarily call them a rock and roll band, I'm going to tell it right here. Van Halen could swing with the best of them. Listen to I'm the One. That drum part, that is an up-tempo swing. They could swing with the best of them, at least as far as rock guys go. And, the swing, if you listen to early Chuck Berry stuff, the thing that people would say, the defining sound of that and why that is rock and roll is you had Chuck playing the straight eights, but you had a drummer that was playing a swing beat. And those two things combined created this push and pull that a lot of people have forgotten about. I was lucky when I started playing that I got into 50s rock right out of the gate. That was my gateway to music, was Elvis and Chuck Berry. And I loved that stuff. And I would take Chuck Berry records to my guitar lessons. I'm gonna say hi to my original guitar player, a guitar teacher, Jay Ergo. He watches this channel. And I would take Chuck Berry albums to my lessons, and he would teach me Roll Over Beethoven, and he would teach me, there's the planes going. He would teach me these Chuck Berry things. And that was the foundation of my lead playing. So when I, all of a sudden, would be in a garage band and it had time to play a solo, and I heard the Rolling Stones, and I heard what Keith Richards was doing, and I knew Man, those are just Chuck Berry licks. That's just Chuck Berry, especially the early Stones. That's all they were really doing. So I immediately, that helped me learning a few Chuck Berry intros, like, Johnny Be Good and Roll Over Beethoven and School Days and, all that kind of stuff. Learning little bits and pieces of that. And I can't even say that, back in the day I didn't play Johnny Be Good correctly. I still probably don't know. I'd have to listen to it and go over it if I wanted to play the intro exactly right. But, a lot of people, whether it was James Burton when he played with Elvis and Jimi Hendrix, his version of Johnny Be Good, they played their version of the intro. The real, that Chuck Berry stuff, man. Go back, hey youngsters, go back and learn some Chuck Berry intros. Learn the intro to Johnny Be Good. It's harder than you think it is. And imagine being, a guitar player in 1950 and putting a turntable on that and mind blown. Man, it's some challenging stuff, I'm telling you. And to get the feel right and to swing it the way, that rhythm section did, it's something else. And so, when I say there aren't any rock and roll bands, it's because they don't have that connection to the swing. And the 50s, rock music may have been the last generation that was tied, where the rhythm sections, a lot of times that maybe were playing on the records, or the guys that were playing in those bands had grown up listening to swing and grown up playing swing. And so rock and roll was just, putting the guitar out front, out front and having a, lead vocalist and, coming up with that thing. So, when I hear like a guy like Kirk Hammett from Metallica, or Metallica, the band, that is a band that I don't hear any Chuck Berry influence, rock and roll influence. On the other hand, Van Halen, listen to the start of the solo to You Really Got Me. What is he playing there? He's playing Chuck Berry. So there's a song. There is a song by Bob Seger called Rock and Roll Never Forgets. Okay, now in the song, there's a lyric. All of Chuck's children are out there playing his licks. Get into your kicks. He's imploring someone who's hitting their 30s and maybe stopped going out to the clubs and feeling a little under the gun and feeling a little old, to get out there in those clubs, put those kicks on, and get out there, because all of Chuck's children are out there playing his licks. Now, who are Chuck's children? Keith Richards, Brian Jones, James Burton to some extent, although he was on the scene in a similar time period. But, he played some Chuck Berry licks. Anybody that came up, Jimi Hendrix was a child of Chuck Berry. Alvin Lee was a child of Chuck Berry. George Harrison was a child of Chuck Berry. Any of the guys playing on the Bob Seger songs were children of Chuck Berry. Mike Campbell from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was a child of Chuck Berry. All of Chuck's children are out there playing his licks. Now you can hear that. You can hear that lick all over the radio. And still to this day, when I would be playing in a wedding band and they'd pull out, we'd pull out occasionally some 50s rock and roll, some shake, rattle, and roll or some stuff like that. And then I'll just go right back into that and I'll sit on that thing because, man, we were all children. We were all Chuck's children playing rock and roll. you know, I was born in 1966, but man, my ears were back in 56. My ears pulled me back, and I'm thankful that they did, because, you know, a band like Metallica can rock, but they can't roll. That's kind of the breaking point I hear in music was the thrash. I don't hear any roll in that music. So, you know, Van Halen, they could swing their butts off. And Eddie Van Halen, I think he knew when he played the You Really Got Me solo. One, he may have been sort of quoting Dave Davies and what he did, because certainly the Kinks, man, they were playing Chuck Berry licks too in their solos. So I think Eddie was like, I'm gonna quote Chuck. And then what does he do right after that? He goes right into his tapping thing. And it's a statement. It's a statement about, here's the past, and now here's the future. But he firmly had his feet planted in the past before he could take us into the future. So don't discount the roll. Yeah, you can rock, but don't forget the roll, man.